It's on.
Okay.
You're on camera.
This is a quick tour, okay?
Yes, sir.
Quick tour of Fiere by Tim Roop. I just wish my friend Bob Murphy was here to give it.
Say that again, a quick tour?
The quick tour of Fiere. I just wish my friend Bob Murphy was here to give the tour himself because he was here.
And you are? Tim Murphy.
I'm Tim Roop. No, I'm
Tim
not
Roop.
a Murphy. I could never be a Murphy. The night of the 5th of June, the Airborne dropped Pathfinders in this area right here. In fact, Drop Zone O was up over the hill in that direction. And that's where the Pathfinders landed to set up the DZ. Now, out of all the regiments that jumped on D-Day, the 505th, the American units, was the only one that had prior combat experience. The 508 had just been attached to the 82nd. They'd never made a jump combat. And the 507th replaced the 504th Parachute Regiment that got shot up in Sicily real bad. So they became part of the 82nd. When the Pathfinders jumped, they had 1 hour to get that drop zone set up. You hear about all the misdrops all over Normandy and the whole bocage, but the 505th had a 90% rate, better than Crest toothpaste almost, okay? Their guys got to the drop zone. There was one company that didn't fare well in the 2nd Battalion, that was F Company, that landed, a group of them landed over the town square. And, you know, a lot of those guys got killed. John Steele got hung up on the church steeple. And
He's still there.
He's still there, yeah. His nephew emailed me the other day, Michael, he lives in Texas. But, yeah, John, he's the only one that's really been here quite a while. Howard Minoan lives here about 6 months out of the year. He's here now, too. But anyway, A Company had the mission to come down here and protect this bridge and keep the enemy tanks from coming across the causeway. Now, what you're looking at now is just a little creek. Back then, it was flooded. The Germans kept all these fields flooded. And from the bridge here, all the way over to that church, that little building you can see over there, that's Causeway Church. The water covered this entire area, as far as you can see, deep enough to drown people. And a lot of them did drown. And Eve, that owns the manor here, he just showed us a parachute harness that he found a ton of stuff over the years. But anyway, what happened, they came down here and there was a real fight for this bridge. The houses here, there were Germans in the manor house, and they got down here and the fight here lasted for like 4 days. It was a heavy battle. And they couldn't get the Germans out of the house. There were other troops from the 508 that were coming. 507th was over here at Timey's Orchard, Colonel Timey's, or the 507th. Those guys were like isolated. They couldn't get out of there. So they were trying to get those guys out. They couldn't get them out. They're across the way. They couldn't do anything. And General Gavin landed way over that way. And they found a way across the water, and they made their way down here. You see a place up there, General Gavin's Foxhole, it says. I don't know if it was or not, but so he came down here and directed things. Some of the 508 made their way around from up by the railroad track, and they had the mission to guard in that track against trains and stuff, because there were still trains coming through too. But some of the guys swung around this house. They didn't know that the other guys were on the other side of the house. It was like a three-pronged attack, and it was sort of messed up because nobody knew the other guys were over there. So it was a real dangerous situation.
This is on the morning of June 6th.
On the 6th.
On the 6th.
And finally, they were able to take the house, but there was a problem there. You probably read it in the book. One of the Germans decided he was going to surrender, and he waved the sheet out. They sent a guy down to go accept the surrender. Well, his buddies on the other side of the house, on this side, didn't see the sheet, and they shot and killed the guy. And that was when they decided it was all over, and they threw everything they had into that house. And I don't think any Germans came out of there alive. And the house pretty much burned down before it was over.
This house is still, has it been rebuilt?
Oh yeah. Well, not this one, but the one back behind there, the manor house. This was all part of the same network of houses.
Yes.
If you look up around the backside here, you'll see remnants of the ramparts that the Vikings left there. it's really, yeah, it's pretty
Goes
interesting.
back a ways.
This goes back a long ways. So anyway, finally they got organized and everything, and they decided that they were going to take that causeway. And they lost a lot of guys taking that causeway. 82nd lost over 500 guys here.
You say taking it or holding it?
They had to take it. That was their goal, to take it. And they decided that they were going to, well, the Germans decided they weren't going to take it either. And one morning, I can't remember what day. You remember the day that they did the tanks? I can't remember right off.
When the 508
No.
finally attacked.
A505.
A505, they moved the tank, the stuff down here onto the bridge.
Yeah, well, they
On
had,
June
they
7th.
had a gun sitting up there,
Mm-hmm.
and the gun was firing. I think that gun got knocked out finally. But there were 3 tanks that came across the road. This road was the only thing above water. This was the only way you could really come. And A Company 505 had 2 bazooka teams over here.
Where were they, Tim? You want to tell us?
There was one team on this side of the bridge, 2 of them, right over here,
Right here?
right over here.
Right here where the car, beyond the car is?
And I think they were back, like, right here by the wall here.
Yeah.
And the other team was over here on this side of the bridge. And those guys stood in an exposed position, and, well, you got it right there.
And they fired out, right?
They knocked all 3 of those tanks out, yeah. And there were 4 distinguished service crosses given out, and they call that Marcus Heim Way because he was one of the guys that got Distinguished Service Cross, but there were 4 of them. It was Marcus Heim, Boulderson, Peterson, and Prindle. But that wasn't the highest award given here. The 325th Glider Infantry was finally told to assault and go and take this area here and get across there. Well, they tried, and with 507, and the whole thing was a nightmare in the end. But Charles de Glopper, who was in C Company 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, he was a BAR gunner, and his guys had to get out of there, and he says, go. He covered them. And first he got hit, I believe, in the knees, fell down to the ground. He kept firing that BAR until they finally got him. But
Were the Germans entrenched that were fighting against them, or were
I don't think they
were
were
moving?
They were moving. They were moving. They kept trying to get across this bridge. That was the goal. And they came with those tanks. Infantry was with the tanks, reinforced with infantry. And the 82nd said they're not going to cross this bridge, and that's all there is to it. And like Bob Murphy said in the book, the only Germans came across that bridge were prisoners. Not a one of them came across there. But eventually they took the causeway, but like I said, it was a big cost. Over 500 men lost doing that to get across that bridge. But they kept the tanks from coming back into the battle. The same time this was going on, though, the first night, second night, the 2nd Battalion 505 was on the other side of Ste Mere Eglise at a place, Neuville-aux-Plaines. And they held off like a reinforced regiment up there, you know, the one group. Turner Turnbull and I think Waverly Ray both got Distinguished Service Crosses out of that. And unfortunately, both of them, I believe, were killed before, you know, Turnbull got killed there, I believe. Waverly Ray, I think, got killed in Holland. But it all, I mean, everything fell together. But Bob Murphy's book, No Better Place to Die, he called it that because their lieutenant, his name was Dolan. Bill Owens was his platoon sergeant, Bob Murphy's, and he says, you know, we got to get out of here. So Owens gets up to Dolan and says, look, you know, we're running out of ammo and everything. We got to get out of here. And Dolan just took a piece of scratch paper and wrote on it, I couldn't think of a better place to die. We're not going anywhere. And they held on, and that's how Bob Murphy named his book, No Better Place to Die. But a lot of them did die here. Battalion commander got killed here, Kellum. I think the first night, I think he was...
Tim, where was Bob Murphy's foxhole in context? Where
in
was
this
he
area
dug
here?
in?
I believe he was over in here, in this area.
That's what I thought.
That monument there, Bob was behind the funds to get that monument, just like the C-47 in the museum at Ste Mere Eglise. Yeah, he did a lot for this town. He could have been the mayor.
Quite a guy.
I was with him 25 years ago tonight,
Wow.
and I'm going to put some flyers up by his street sign, Rue Robert Murphy, this afternoon sometime. His daughter's here, and his grandson.
So he the one you was telling me about at the reunion that you guys were going to jump that year, and he died a couple of months before? Is that
No.
him?
Well, he quit jumping a few years ago. He had 986 jumps when he quit jumping, and he was still jumping up until I think the 60th. I think he quit, but no, it might have been 50. I think he quit the 50th. But yesterday we were with a guy in the 101st, Ralph Manley, who jumped yesterday out at Angoville Plain. He jumped on D-Day. He's only 85. Of course he's still jumping. But I had another friend of mine, Julius Eisner, who was in the 2nd Battalion, and we were with him a couple nights ago. He got hit in the helmet on D-Day as a Pathfinder with a small artillery round and cut a hole in the side of his head, and they patched him up, gave him another helmet. He goes back out. In Holland, he got shot in the legs real bad in the Nijmegen Railway Yard. Resistance got him to the hospital. It was a German hospital. Next day, the 82nd overran the place. He was glad because he's Jewish, and he said this wouldn't be good if they found out.
Yeah.
They got him up to Antwerp, got him back to England, told him he'd probably never walk again. He goes AWOL from the hospital. He started feeling better, exercising. He just started doing that this winter once his girlfriend came back to England. He's crazy. I talk to him all the time. So he said, I got to get back over to the 82nd. So he had a buddy in the Army Air Corps, knew where he was, and goes, looks him up, says, hey man, you got to get me over to France. He said, for what? He said, I got to get back to the 82nd. He said, you crazy? I can't do it. He said, you don't know nothing, just get me on a plane. They got him on a glider run going into Charters, France. He got picked up in Paris, arrested by the MPs. They went to see his papers. He said, I don't have any papers. I'm in the 82nd Airport. They said, whoa. And he explained the story. They held him overnight. Next morning, they let him go. They got him up to Camp Sassans. They said, yo, we believe your story. Got him up to Sassans. The 82nd was gone. That's outside of Reims. And next thing you know, Julius is in Belgium, because that's where the 82nd was, in the Bulge. He goes down to the CO, and he says, where you been? He said, I'm AWOL from the hospital in England. He says, good, grab a rifle, we need you. And I asked him about it last year, because I never thought about what happened in the end of that deal. This guy was AWOL. He said, General Gavin said anybody that left the replacement detachments or the hospitals to come back to the division, he'd get them off the charges. And he did.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's one of the interesting stories. But one of the best ones was how Bob made full bird colonel. Bob was a private here that day. He got wounded outside of Monteborg, and then when they jumped into Holland a few months later in September, well, he was recovering from wounds and got out of the hospital, and he wanted a couple days downtime. And the lieutenant said, I can't let you go. We might get called out. Oh, you got to let me have a few days. He said, look, if I let you go and something happens, we get called out, I don't know anything. Murphy says, that's great. Go ahead, put me down for that. They had a call out. On September 17th, he's on the plane getting ready to go to Holland. Officer comes up to the back tail of the C-47 and says, is there a Murphy on here, Robert M? They said, yeah, he's here. They said, tell him to get off the aircraft. They said, for what? They said, he's up on charges for AWOL. And they almost had a mutiny, and they looked at this guy and they said, Murphy isn't going anywhere but Holland. He's going to Holland. These guys are locked and loaded. They said, Murphy is going to Holland. And they said, you know, maybe we better get away from these guys because it looks like Murphy's going to Holland. He went to Holland. End of the war. Oh, he got shot in Mook, taking prisoners down the road. Dolan sent him down with some Germans, 5 of them. He says, get them down that road, get them out of here. Murphy said, there's Germans down. He said, I don't care. He goes down, a lady looks out of house and goes, Fallschirmjäger, German paratroopers. And Bob tells these guys, lay down the road. He goes around, he goes hand to hot. His mom was German, so he spoke a little bit. Comes out, he's got 5 more. Goes around the other side of the house, and the lady's pointing again. There were more of them. He does the same thing, but this time he gets shot in the backside. He swings around and fires his Thompson in the woods across the road, and the thing jammed as he was firing it, and he's going, oh man, he says, this isn't good. These guys got all their weapons right there. He pulls a grenade, throws a grenade across the road, and then looks at him and says, let's go. They didn't know it jammed on him. So he's walking with a weapon that's like those ones you saw in the barn a little while. She saw 2 of them that the rounds are still, they jammed. So he gets them up, and Dolan raises hell and says, I send you away from here with 5, and now you got 15. And he says, yeah, and look, I got shot. He says, and I'm not going back down that road either. He said, I'm not going back down. So anyway, Murphy, he comes back to the States. He goes through law school, becomes a hotshot lawyer up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he goes in the Army Reserve. He gets promoted up to full bird colonel from a private here at Lafayette. He's on his active duty for training, and they set him down the Pentagon. He passes some general in the corridor of the Pentagon, and he turns around and says, hey, Murphy, says, did you get that start or that eagle recently? He said, yes, sir. Not long ago at all, gendarmerie. So he says, well, you know why you got it, don't you? He said, well, I guess my records were better than some of the others. And this general looks at him and says, no, that's not it at all. He says, I was on the promotion board. He said, one of the guys says, check this out. Look, this guy, man, he had a chance to get out. They came down the aircraft. They almost had a mutiny. And he could have gotten out and gone back over to combat right then. And he chose to go to combat. Look at this. They said, promote that guy. So Bob told me in a nutshell, he got promoted for being AWOL to full bird colonel. And that's one of them things he didn't tell a lot of people. But he told me some stuff over the years. Like I said, I knew him over 30 years. So
It's pretty nice.